Awesome. Brethren, welcome to the Lodge of Research. It's always nice to see old friends as well as new ones. So my presentation is Freemasonry and Social Media. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Convenient title and fitting. Also bear with me, I'm not used to using a tablet, but this works out a little bit as far as being able to walk around with it, so I apologize. As long as humans have been civilized, information has been shared between people, from stories being passed mouth to ear, through pictures, then to a point where pictures became written word. From drawing on any surface, then clay, animal skins, eventually papyrus, modern paper, hand-copied tablets, scrolls to books, then suddenly around the 15th century, the invention of the printing press revolutionizes mass-produced letters, books, newspapers. With each of these improvements, the copying and process become easier, cheaper to produce, and more efficient. The audience became wider and further reaching. This also caused more efficient fact storage. In the 1800s, with the harnessing of electricity, there was a new jump in communication. Fax machines, telegraph, telephones. Some might be surprised to know that fax machines were around before the other two. Recording on audio on wax cylinders and then discs. Photographs, then moving pictures. Mechanical computers, radio, television, computers, personal computers, laptop computers, cell phones, finally, touchscreen smart devices. Every step faster, more efficient, its reach becoming exponential. Now in the present day, as recent as the mid-90s, we have multiple avenues and filters for the information we consume. How we consume with one another, or communicate with one another, with the groups we interact and work with. There's international, national, regional, and local news at your fingertips. Websites, streaming services, assorted social media platforms. With all the technology's progress, all of that is becoming more intertwined and sometimes blended. In summary, social media has always existed since man has been able to communicate. Right now, more than ever, the sum of human knowledge, points of view, ignorance, willful misinformation are at your fingertips if you are able to afford it. So we come to the good. Lack of communication has been the downfall of many great organizations. This was a quote written on the wall of my lodge in the social area when I was a kid. Thus, we come to the more positive aspects of social media. Freemasonry, whether it be Grand Lodges, lodges, rites, appendant bodies, or Masons themselves, rely on their ability to communicate with each other and the public. This has been made blatantly obvious with the coming and lingering of the COVID-19 pandemic. Freemasons weren't able to attend lodge and any other functions in the majority of countries due to safety concerns. Humans, but more to my point, Masons, have a desire to communicate. After being either asked and eventually told to limit attendance or stop meetings altogether, Masons went where they already were, online. Facebook already had a Masonic presence for years. From early message boards to MySpace, for those who remember it, Facebook, Twitter, now there's a Quora, and at least one paid tiled site. This one's Freemasons Connect. But now brothers were using it as a dedicated line of communication to their membership. They started having impromptu and scheduled Zoom meetings to catch up with each other. It got to the point where brothers were actually becoming closer because they were openly discussing more of their personal, actual lives. Personally, I became involved with an international Zoom meeting, originally sponsored by ESSA Lodge, under the United Grand Lodge of England, out of Cornwall, UK. Every Thursday, we have our online get-together. We have a couple of toasts to absent brethren. and essentially just talk. I should point out that even though these are tiled meetings requiring recognition by the United Grand Lodge of England, nothing is discussed that violates our obligations. It's more or less to keep out crazies.
They let you in.
They let me in, and that's their fault. Through this group, the chat is 24/7, and a lot of information is shared on private page, like their group hosts lectures, goings-on with Freemasonry around the world. A couple of us have met face-to-face. I have personally met the leader of the Grand Encampment of the in Ontario, Jeff Perry, I believe. Met him at a Windsor Lodge visitation. A donation of a bus and aid for Ukrainian refugees in Poland was organized, donated, and delivered from England to Poland, and just came to fruition yesterday morning, as a matter of fact. And that was organized on that same Zoom group. Just on a whim, looking for help, and brother stepped in, started donating, and managed to find a microbus and drive it all the way over to Poland to help them out. Some bullet points as far as social media. Good Masonic Zoom or Google Meet meetings and chat groups. The global meeting I just described. I know Cork County Zoom from Ireland. Square and Compass Promotions. Worship brother Cameron Anderson is a friend to the Lodge of Research, and he does a lot as far as that goes. Private and public lodge pages, open private communication with members and the public. So for those of us, some of us have private lodge groups, and that's how they share some of the written word, and some of it, as far as posting the next picnic or what's going on in the future, has a public standing. I've seen both pages and YouTube for Sapir Aude. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's YouTube. This is wonderful, open lectures and discussions on Masonic topics. They're open to the public. They don't violate any obligations, but they generally have a discussion with people all around the world. Some of them are waking up at 3 a.m. to attend these lectures. Masonic regalia goods and service vendor pages. Masonic antique groups, trading, collecting, and preserving. A lot of history. Education groups like the Flaxus Society, Prince Hall Think Tank, Detroit Masonic Temple, Library, Archive, and Research Center. Michigan Masonic Library has a very decent presence online. Masonic author pages and history preservation and study is available. You only need to have a couple of brothers in your connection, and you would be surprised at the vast amount of information that is available to you. I've seen TikToks, YouTube channels, like Michigan's own Travel Time. From Whence Came You podcast. There's a brother a Prince Hall brother out of New York, Josh Feliciano's The Lost One podcast, dealing with former clandestine Masons. He was once a clandestine Mason. Once he realized he had been duped, he didn't want to see other people getting the wool pulled over their eyes. So he now basically interviews brothers that have been, quote, healed and brought into regular Freemasonry, and kind of discusses the things that attracted them to it, and then also some of the practices that kind of point out the clandestine nature of these bogus lodges. Recently, the Michigan Lodge of Research and Information, I set up a YouTube channel so we can kind of see some of these lectures. There's only 3 now, including this one, so unfortunately we're going to have to improve on the amount that's available. Scottish Rite has had Night at the Rite online reunions. I'm not sure if they're still doing that now that COVID's kind of settling a little bit, but I know that was available. Scottish Rite Journal podcast, the Scottish Rite Southern Masonic Jurisdiction has a YouTube, and they have a lot of different papers that they read from their journal. I developed a regular Michigan Masons traveling group, and we were talking earlier in Rob's presentation about sometimes when you're traveling to another lodge, you feel kind of all by yourself. This was one of those things that was developed to make it so that when you're traveling with brothers you already know, And if any of you have traveled with me in in that group, you'll know that we all tend to end up sitting together. It's like having our own little lodge visitation, but we're all from different lodges. My apologies. All right, and discussion of Masonic topics, books, papers, helping with research. I've seen a lot of Masons use it as a tool to find out more information, looking for learned Masonic authors and scholars like yourselves. Through the previous avenues, we observe the spread of useful education, keeping a limited social connection with our brethren, obviously, take a more involved hand in the education about Freemasonry and what we do when it comes to the general public. This allows us to put some conspiracies and myths to rest, at the same time pointing out who we are, some of the positives for the community. The more tiled social media can be a conduit for organization of public events, where you wouldn't necessarily want the public to know specifics of a lodge function. For example, organizing a funeral for a deceased brother or humanitarian efforts. And let's not forget the PR and sweet feel-good photos of brothers having a good time, ringing bells for the Salvation Army, enjoying a banquet together, or marching a parade, you name it. It's all available on there. It's one of the more positive things you see on social media when it comes to Freemasonry. That said, the bad. Unfortunately, this is where at least the first shoe drops. Just because we have all the communications and public relations tools at our disposal doesn't mean it's smooth sailing for us. There are a lot of people out there that are uneducated, willfully ignorant, or outright against Freemasonry for one reason or another. Sometimes people spread malicious rumors and half-truths just because they don't know better. That's what they heard, or some group actively painting us in a negative light. There are things we can do to combat this and things we cannot. As Freemasons, it's our duty to educate not just ourselves, but it's also his obligation not to argue with ignorance. So we have to draw a fine line with that. So I'll start this section off with the big bads and work my way down. Conspiracies. If you guys have been on Facebook for any length of time, you just have to be talking to somebody in public. You've heard conspiracies. From Illuminati to aliens, from lizard people to the New World Order, conspiracies are never ending. They have been around Masonry almost since Freemasonry has been in existence. Unfortunately, social media amplifies these perceptions. It allows a small minority to seem like a loud mob. What's worse is, if they aren't shut down, they'll continue and sometimes grow. In our social media landscape, these conspiracies flourish and evolve. It's so common on the internet that some people just accept it as the truth. Scammers. Freemasonry has a few reputations. There is one we actively cultivate, where we are bettering ourselves through lessons, moral teachings, do humanitarian and philanthropic work, and attract good quality men, some being publicly rich and famous. There is a reputation that we don't create, but not on purpose, but nonetheless we create it. Freemasonry has members who have enough disposable income to be in a lodge and other Masonic bodies. Some of us not so much, right? We have the money to help people in our communities and worldwide, and publicly acknowledge and promote our well-to-do and more famous members. Scammers take advantage of conspiracy rumors and our good works and reputations to fleece people worldwide out of their hard-earned money in the name of either helping us do right, participating with our fundraisers and that sort of thing, or convincing these poor people in some of these countries that they can join us and get all the wealth and riches for simply giving these scammers some outrageous portion of their own wealth. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do about this. Poor people are desperate and will risk loss to rise above their situation. It's human nature. And well-meaning people will be conned out of their funds because they want to help us and help others. And unfortunately, there are people that will take advantage of that. Also, I should point out that there are actual paid advertisements for the Illuminati. Google Ads will put a post to join the Illuminati. All you got to do is pay them the cash. These guys aren't even trying to be secret about their scam. They're counting on the public believing anyone paying for a Google ad must be legitimate. Another big bad, clandestine Masons. Clandestine Masons, lodges, grand lodges, dependent organizations, clandestine and bogus lodges have been around for a long time. So much so, our ceremonies warn against it. Now, some clandestine Masons were simply conned into believing they were joining a legitimate, regular, recognized organization. They're good people. They didn't do anything wrong. But back in, say, the 1800s, these bogus lodges peddling their degrees got away with the fact that people didn't know they weren't real. Now, they're counting on the fact that most people don't know clandestine bogus bodies exist and that people won't really research enough about Masons to realize it. All they have to do is throw on an apron and they say, hey, man, get a couple photos, knock it off from somebody else, some other Mason's page. Hey, we're a legitimate group. This is partially our fault. In my opinion, we don't do enough to warn the public. If we do warn them, some of our brothers are made to come off looking like the bad guys. These clandestine guys are good at twisting around to make themselves seem legit. They're trained to be con men. Remember, most of them don't know it. I'd also like to point out here, these guys actively try to recruit people on Masonic Facebook pages, groups, TikToks, Instagram, and hoping they'll just be considered regular Freemasons in the middle of the mix. They count on the ignorance of the public and real regular Masons. There are still Masons today that I talk to that don't realize that clandestine bogus lodges, cowens, it's a real thing. And there's people that literally try to get into lodges. And the last in this particular group of the bad, uneducated, ignorant religious extremists. As much as we honor and respect our brothers' faiths and beliefs, there's an element in society that actively works against Freemasonry and its members through either their own propaganda, conspiracy theory half-truths and lies, or most times a heavily mixed combination of both that are combined with a religious zealousness and fervor that creates an echo chamber on steroids. This combination creates a situation that feeds into the scammers and conspiracy nuts. They all feed off of each other. No matter the amount of truth you present to these people in public forums, they simply twist words, start shouting in caps lock, or they go on the attack somewhere else. The only thing you can do is correct their misconception or outright lies, and hope general public can tell the difference between the truth and the nut, right? With the widespread use of social media, they aren't trying to make Masons look as bad, they are trying to make Masons look as bad as they want them to look. They're out tarnishing another group's reputation. If it's not the Masons, they're just out to hurt people's reputations and maybe boost their own. The worst part about this group is that they believe what they preach. And they'll show up in legitimate Masonic discussions trying to sow doubt in members, but more so to the public that either they're to ask questions or came to see what we're about. They just kind of intervene and kind of what I'd like to refer to as chicken hawk. They're just trying to cut you down and make sure you don't get any momentum. And now finally the ugly. The bad was the first shoe, now the ugly is the other shoe dropping. None of us want to hear this, but we are our own worst enemy. A lot of our problems we create or have created, and a lot of us refuse to learn from our mistakes. We are our reputations in public and online. I can't tell you how many times I've seen legitimate regular brothers go on the attack on a social platform, either being rude, bigoted, misinformed, sometimes willfully ignorant. How many times have you seen a brother of your or the opposite of your political or religious view go off the deep end on their page and follow it up with, well, they have the right to their opinion. Or saying something extremely negative about someone that doesn't fit in with their own labels. I like to think that I'm not part of that group, but I know that there's been times where I've even said something that because I just disagreed with it flat out, and then I've looked back on it and realized I was probably, even if I agree that I'm right, because we all do, I might have gone about it the wrong way. I know I've said things I wouldn't want used as an example of who I am or Freemasonry. Or another example, an American or Canadian brother outright cutting down and being unmasonic in how they talk about women-only lodges in the UK and other parts of the world. Now, neither the United Grand Lodge of England nor any regular recognized lodge recognizes women Freemasons. We don't sit in lodge with them. We don't acknowledge them as a regular body. But the United Grand Lodge of England has good working relationships with these lodges when they work together for charities. They do not break their obligations on either side. They don't want to sit in tiled lodges with each other. The women don't want to participate with the guys either, right? Changes the dynamics of the lodge. Some of these ladies are our brothers' wives in foreign countries. That said, the moment they are mentioned, a bunch of rude brothers immediately comment, "Not my lodge." And the inevitable, "There's Eastern Star for that." Not knowing that in the United Grand Lodge of England, Eastern Star is considered a clandestine body. They don't have the same things that we have over here. Just like you would look at women Freemasons and say that we consider that clandestine. We don't sit in lodge with them. Or assuming dues cards are a worldwide standard, or that some jurisdictions a Freemason may ask someone to join. Or in that other jurisdictions, if you seek out a Masonic lodge and not a Mason and ask to join, you'll be banned and never be able to join a lodge. There are different regulations and rules in other jurisdictions, regular jurisdictions that we recognize. I point out all these because I've watched some horrible things being said about our brothers because they think they have all the answers. I'm a know-it-all too. I've been guilty of it. Meanwhile, the public is witnessing this disharmony. Your scammers, your bogus Masons, and your religious fundamentalists that are working with extreme prejudice to try to make us in a bad light, you're allowing them to prove to everyone that you're evil and that they're right as far as they're concerned. And they'll twist it around and make it look that way. We allow our basest, rudest selves to take over, especially online and social media. We become overzealous, unmasonic, super public relations for those that would do our fraternity harm. My conclusion, which I'm sure you guys are happy this is wrapping up. For Freemasonry and Freemasons in general, social media is really a triple-edged sword. It's a fantastic public relations, lodge organizing, intra-communication tool. It's also a well-operated tool by people who would use and abuse our fraternity, and they've mastered it, and they're still developing their technique as well. We are our own worst enemies when it comes to this. Social media is a tool like any other. We need to educate our membership. We need our brothers to get a better grasp of how they behave online as well as public. If we don't take control of our story, it could mean our future. Thank you, brethren, for your time. If there's any questions as far as any of this goes, I can answer afterwards or even now. I do have photos and stuff and links if anybody wants to know about any of the information I provided. I just don't have it with me on this, but I can get a hold of you and give you that information later if you would like it.
Thank you, Brother Mike.
I've got a question. I'm gonna present.
That's fine. Worship Brother Matt Shelton.
So, do you have, and I don't know if you do you have recommendations for how you would suggest that a brother might approach a situation where, we'll take your situation of the ugly.
Okay.
What approach would you recommend that a brother take when he's witnessing that online?
So it's funny that you mention that, because that can become its own nasty, discombobulated mess as well, because now you're getting into a back and forth, and now your disharmony with said brother is making us look really bad. I found that if you can politely correct them publicly, and not to put them down, but more or less to show the public the positive and more accurate view of that. I've also found that if you try to contact them separately and maybe comment to them in Messenger or whatever the platform is, you might be able to kind of, I don't want to say talk them off a cliff, but the proverbial whispering good counsel in their ear. What I really recommend, because by the time most of us are, I don't know, pretty old, right? So a lot of us are set in our ways. Sometimes it's just trying to remind people that you are in the public. You're putting out there what everybody sees. I recommend that when a brother comes into the order, have the discussion with them. Remind them of their obligations. You're not allowed to sit in a lodge of clandestine Masons. The only way you know that they're not clandestine is that you know somebody that you've sat in tile lodge with that has sat in tile lodge with them, right? But at the same time, you're a Mason, right? You're a good man. We found that you could probably be better. At the same time, when you have that discussion with a newly made brother, or even before he's made, have that conversation about how their perception is in public. I mean, publicly you shake my hand, how you doing, how's the family and the kids? But if you get on Facebook and you just go to the wall with